edition of the book review blog. I'm a book reviewer, and today we're going to review the book Skeleton Crew by Stephen King. I don't have the book myself, but I did get it on my Kindle. So it is a book of a short story collection of about 22 short stories. So this is going to be the first part of this book review, this video is, and then I'll continue with the second part. Basically what I'll do is I'll split the book reviews in half of the short stories. So let's get started. The first book, or the short story that is in Skeleton Crew, is actually a novella, is what it's called. It's called The Mist. And most of you know of the movie The Mist that came out, and this is the short story that the movie is based on, or a novella. Anyway, it focuses on a family that's called the Draytons. There's David Drayton, who's the husband. Steffi Drayton is the wife, and then they have a son named Billy. Billy's about 5, and they live off an island off of Maine, and they have, one night there's like a horrible storm, and where they like have to take shelter in their cellar, and then they survive that, and the next day there's cleanup, and they live on kind of a lake as well. They don't live in an island, they live in a lake, and the lake has this like what they call a mist, or there's kind of like a general fog over it, and they were saying, well, okay, that's kind of odd because usually lakes and things don't have that type of thing, but we'll keep an eye on it, see what happens with it, and see where it goes from there. So David and Billy and a neighbor of theirs, who I believe his name is Brad Norton, they go to town to go to the store, and while they're there, the mist gets bigger, and to where it's basically a fog, and where it envelops this supermarket, and there are attempts to go outside, but they realize that once they go outside that there are beings or things in the mist that will kill them. And my understanding of it is they're like tentacle, like octopus things, because there's like scenes in the book where there's like where like tentacles will reach around people and will suck them, basically. Kind of gross. There's also different there's also flies that come at the windows of the supermarket, and then there's like other beings and things that come in. So basically, like, the townspeople are stuck there, or at least who's in the supermarket, and when you get like a group of people involved and in kind of a really near-death situation, they start to kind of go crazy. And like there's a character, I wrote notes down, so excuse me, and I didn't write her name. Anyway, there's a character who is she's like a religious fanatic, or she's like, this is God trying to punish us, and so we need to get on my side and sing praise to God or something. But it's basically like a definite fanatical thing of and eventually they're like, we need to sacrifice people, we need to sacrifice children, and one of the children that they try to get in order to sacrifice is Billy. And so, I mean, that's put to an end, or to a stop rather quickly. And one of the big differences between the book and movie is that there is a part in at the end of the story that Billy, David, and then a bunch of other people in the town, or in the supermarket, try and make a run for it and see what's going on. Like, Steffi didn't go with them, so David's like, I need to know what happened to my wife. Is she okay, or did these things in this mist get her? So, what ends up happening is in the end of the book, they just go out. You don't know if they find Steffi. You don't know if they survive. You don't know anything. I mean, the movie has an obvious ending, which is good for movies, but Stephen King makes this ending of the book kind of wide open. So I liked that aspect of it. The next book that I'm going to, or the next story is called Here There Be Tigers, and this was probably my favorite short story, and it's really early in the book. But anyway, it focuses on a first grader named Charlie, and he's sitting in class, and he really needs to go to the bathroom. And so finally his teacher, her name is Mrs. Bird, who Charlie is like scared of, or he doesn't really like, finally lets him go. And so Charlie goes into the bathroom and notices there's a tiger in the bathroom. And it's just kind of funny that, that's something you definitely don't see every day, is a tiger in the bathroom. So, and that's where I'm going to leave it. It's a very short story, but it's very cute and very kind of fun. So, anyway, that's that. The next story is called The Monkey, and it's not exactly like the monkey's paw aspect of it. What it is it's a story that focuses on the Shelburne family. There's Hal, who's the husband, Terry, who's the wife, and Dennis and Petey, who are the sons. And Hal has inherited a home from an aunt who I believe died, and while they're searching through this home, he finds this, like, monkey. It's basically kind of like what you'd think of, like, an organ grinder monkey, with cymbals. And Hal goes through a lot of flashbacks in this story where he remembers instances where, in his life, where he has had something horrible happen to somebody in his family. And every time that, like, right before something happens to his family, he'll hear the monkey clang their cymbals, and, like, clang, clang, clang. And there's, like, a ton of stuff where Hal thinks in his head, like, every time the monkey goes, like, clang, 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 somebody has died. Like, clang, 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 you're dead, type of thing. And so, there's always, like, who is it that's going to die? Or who is it that, like, is it me this time? Or is it somebody else in my family? So, again, it talks about the things that he did over through his childhood, and then it goes to, like, today, where he tries to get rid of the monkey, and he tries to bury it at sea, I guess, or tie it to something heavy and bury it at sea. And that's where I'm going to kind of leave, where, you don't know if he survives or not. I'm going to want you to read the book to figure out if he does. And anyway, so that's it for that story. The next story is called Cain Rose Up, and it's a story about a college student named Kurt Garish, and he is in basically his senior year, last final is over. So basically his college career is over. And he's done very well, but for college, and but he has something in his mind has gone bananas or something, and I mean it's very calm, where he calmly finishes his final, calmly goes back into his dorm, calmly talks to people in his dorm room, and then when he shuts his door, calmly goes into his closet and gets a rifle, and calmly walks to his window, which faces out in kind of like the mall area of his college, and loads the rifle in and starts shooting. And again, it's kind of like Here There Be Tigers. It's a pretty short story, so you kind of know what eventually happens to Kurt. I mean, like, after so many times that he shoots, I think he does kill a couple people, that he's going to be taken down by college police. So it's kind of like another story that I read called Rage, where it deals with the school shooting and the horrors and tragedies because of that. So anyway, the next story that I'm going to do is called Mrs. Todd's Shortcut, and it's basically two people named Harry and David who live in Castle Rock, Maine, and they talk about this man named Wentworth Todd, and who is basically kind of like a bigwig in this town, and not necessarily about him, but about his second wife named Ophelia Todd, or his first wife, excuse me, named Ophelia Todd, and her big thing about in this story is that she wants to have a shorter distance between Bangor and Castle Rock. And again, Castle Rock is a fictional city, but basically originally it should take about 160 miles to get from Bangor to Castle Rock. But Ophelia's like, no, there needs to be a shortcut. There's a way that I can get there shorter amount of time. So, Harry is the Todd's caretaker of their summer home in Castle Rock. So, basically, like, there's a couple times where Mrs. Todd's like, okay, go. I bet I can get there in so many miles or so many minutes, basically, and go, turn on the lights in this amount of time. And then he goes and turns on the lights, but then realizes that she's there already. So, and really, it's really remarkable how long it takes her to go down from Bangor to Castle Rock, because eventually it's like in not the single digits, obviously, but it's basically in like double digit times, like 99 miles or 80 miles or things like that. So that's kind of remarkable in that mind. The next story is called The Jaunt, and this is a science fiction story of futuristic times. It focuses again on the Oatley family, and in the Jaunt times, I believe the year is 2307. So this is 2014, 2307. So anyway, Mr. Oatley they're on kind of a transporter thing to get from Earth to Mars, because they've wasted all of their minerals and all of their usable resources on Earth, and they have to go live on Mars now. But the way to get there is they transport, and in a way called the Jaunt. And in order to do this successfully, the people have to be put to sleep. And so basically the story is about the inventor of this Jaunt and how he attempted to invent it using rats, and it's basically kind of like a trial and error story about how the rats, doing it one way, the rats died automatically. Going through the Jaunt another way, they survived for a little bit, but then they died eventually. And then he finally realized that the rats needed to be put to sleep in order to do that. So, and there was a time when one of the Oatley sons had asked his dad, well, has anybody held their breath while giving the sleeping gas? And his dad's like, well, no, I'd never heard of that. And you can tell that his son is kind of, like, the wheels are turning in his head, where I wonder what happens. And eventually, when they're given the gas, the son does hold their breath, so he doesn't get the sleeping gas. And I'm not going to tell you what happens afterwards, again, because I want you to read the story. So, but it's very interesting. So anyway, that's it for that book. The next story that is in this Skeleton Crew is called The Wedding Gig, and it's based in first person, so it's a narrator telling the story, and it's a narrator who plays in a band that does gigs for weddings and other things that they need to do. But there's a specific wedding that they're doing a gig for, and the bride in this wedding is incredibly fat, and which really is no problem in any other sense, but her brother is the one who hired this wedding gig, and it turns out that this family, the bride's family, is attached to the mob somehow, because during the wedding goes off fine, and it's during the reception that somebody comes in like basically crashes the reception and tells the brother that this other rivalry gang has told this man that his sister, the bride, is fat. And so that basically causes her brother to go nuts and to then go out and do this basic gang war. And so like people die. I think the bride and groom are okay. Maybe the groom dies, but again, it's all told through the perspective of this band leader or this person doing the wedding gig. So I thought that was kind of interesting in that story. So the next story that is in this book is called Paranoid, a Chant, and it's actually a poem. And what it is this person who has no name is basically going on like a paranoid rant about things. He thinks everybody is out to get him, that a man in a trench coat is outside a woman above him who put suction cups on her floor to send rays into his room, type of thing. It's basically like when you read it, you're like, man, this man is really paranoid, so this has an appropriate title. So that's it for that one. Again, it's a short poem, so there's not much of a plot. Excuse me. The next story that I'm going to do is called The Raft, and that is about 4 college friends named, I believe their names are Deke, Randy, and they have Deke and Randy each have girlfriends. I forgot her name. One of them, like Jenny, is one name or something like that, and the other one is Laverne. And it's October, and they're in college, and they have an idea to go to a lake in their neighboring town and swim out to a raft out there to say kind of goodbye to summer, or goodbye to like Indian summer. And so they do that, and so they go out, take all their clothes off at this beach, and swim out to this raft. And again, it's October, and this book is based in Pennsylvania, so it's quite cold. And so they eventually get to the raft, and they're about to turn around to go back when Randy notices in the water that there's kind of what he described as an oil slick, but it's circular. And it's just this thing floating in the water, more like 20 or 30 feet from them. And they're like, there's like this weird thing floating in the water. And so they're like, okay, that's fine. So eventually this thing comes closer to them. And so then eventually it gets to their raft, and the other girl that I didn't know, her name is Rachel, I believe. And so she's looking at this blob, and she sees that there's colors in it. And she kind of is like mesmerized or hypnotized by this. And so she reaches in, and then finally when she touches the blob, it like gets her and gets all over like this black substance all around her hand and like eats her from within. And so like she goes into the water and is basically killed. And so now the 3 of them are freaking out because now this thing is at them, and if they go into the water, they'll get eaten. And so basically it's like a survival story, and it does claim other people, but kind of like The Mist, there is no end to this one where like the last person standing, I'm not going to tell you who it is, the last person standing is basically like, I could make an attempt to go out and swim, or I could not, that type of thing. So you don't know if this person makes it or doesn't. So the next story is called Wordpresser of the Gods, and it's about a man who inherits a word processor. And this word processor is a little odd, where anything that you write on it and hit basically enter or whatever, it does what you tell him to write. So the first thing that this guy figures out is like, I want, 10 gold coins, or I have 10 gold coins, and he hits enter. And then, so finally 10 gold coins appears at his desk, in front of this word processor. So then he's like, wow, okay, well, I can do kind of whatever I want. So he starts to kind of play with it a little bit, and while he's playing with it, he realizes that the word processor is getting hotter, and, like where it's kind of starting to break down. And unfortunately in this man's life, he's married to a woman who basically ignores him and basically just like lives like a blob or slob and does nothing. And but they had a son and he died. And but then he also has his brother's wife and his nephew, basically, and he never really like coveted his brother's wife exactly, but he like wanted to be married to her. But here he's like, she's a really nice woman, and now I'm married to somebody who's not nice, type of thing. So he writes on this thing, my wife's name is blah 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 blah, and he hits delete, and all of a sudden his wife isn't there. And he says, my son's name is blah, blah, blah. And delete. And his son isn't there. And so the last thing that he does is, writes, my wife's name is blah, blah, blah. And that's actually his sister-in-law. And he hits enter. And so basically, yes, his brother's wife has come back from the dead and is his wife, basically. So you don't know if she's changed in any way because of this, or not, but anyway, that's kind of where the book ends. So, again, it's kind of another one of those, you don't know what is going to happen. So, the last story that I'm going to do for this review is called, The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands. And what it is if you remember in this review of, the breathing method with the place in New York where people go and tell stories, it's another one of those things where you go to the same place and people tell stories. But the story that they tell is about a man who would not shake hands with anybody, like would not touch anybody. And it's not like I'm OCD and I'm afraid of germs. It's just kind of a weird thing that would happen. And then you eventually learn that every time that this man touches you, you die. Or touches somebody, I suppose. So, I mean, obviously you don't want them to touch you, because then else you would die. And, what happens to the man is very interesting, and I'm not going to spoil it, because again, I want you to read it, but, it is very interesting. So, that's it for the first half. I'll be right back to do the second half. So, I bid you all farewell, and happy reading.